Last week, many Catholics were celebrating something that Pope Leo XIV had said, that the United States should not have open borders, and that nations have a right to control who enters their territory. But is this really what Pope Leo meant? And how does this tie with how some Catholics view the guidance of the popes and bishops? Hello, everyone, and welcome back. So, last Tuesday, in a meeting with some journalists at Castel Gandolfo, Pope Leo was asked about the United States and immigration. At one point, he said that he was not advocating for open borders and that nations have a right to control their borders. And that's the part where people focused on. There were even memes popping up on social media quoting this particular citation of Pope Leo. But if we look at his full answer, we see that this was not his point at all. So let us see everything that he said. I appreciate very much what the bishops have said. I think it's an important statement. I would invite especially all Catholics, but people of goodwill, to listen carefully to what they said. I think we have to look for ways to treat people humanely, treating people with the dignity that they have. If people are in the United States illegally, there are ways to treat that. There are courts. There is a system of justice. I think there are a lot of problems in the system. No one said that the United States should have open borders. I think every country has a right to determine who and how and when people enter. But when people are living good lives, and many of them for 10, 15, 20 years, to treat them in a way that is extremely disrespectful to say the least, and there has been some violence unfortunately, I think the bishops have been very clear in what they said. And I think that I would just invite all people in the United States to listen to them. So, when you see his full statement, you can notice that his focus was not on border control at all. It was in urging a more humane treatment of immigrants, going so far as to criticize the current administration's policies on immigration as disrespectful and, in some cases, even violent. So, why did he bring up open borders? Because these days, any calls for an immigration reform that makes the system fairer and more humane gets slapped with that label, as if that immediately equates as asking for open borders. Sure, there are some people with more radical political views who do advocate for open borders. But most of the time, when you see someone yelling, oh, open borders, what they're doing is eliciting a boogeyman in order to shut down any challenge to the restrictive immigration policies that they advocate. As if between those restrictive immigration policies and open borders, there was not an infinity of possible middle grounds. Now, you may have noticed that Pope Leo referenced the bishop's statement. Here, he was talking about a special message issued by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops during their fall plenary assembly in Baltimore in November 12, 2025. In this message, the U.S. bishops said, we are disturbed when we see among our people a climate of fear and anxiety around questions of profiling and immigration enforcement. We are saddened by the state of contemporary debate and the vilification of immigrants. We are concerned about conditions in detention centers and the lack of access to pastoral care. We lament that some immigrants in the United States have arbitrarily lost their legal status. We are troubled by threats against the sanctity of houses of worship and the special nature of hospitals and schools. We are grieved when we meet parents who fear being detained, when taking their children to school and when we try to console family members who have already been separated from their loved ones. Catholic teaching exhorts nations to recognize the fundamental dignity of all persons, including immigrants. We bishops advocate for a meaningful reform of our nation's immigration laws and procedures. Human dignity and national security are not in conflict. Both are possible if people of goodwill work together. Now, if you check social media before Pope Leo's intervention, you would see lots of people saying that the bishops here were advocating for open borders. But that's not true, because if you continue reading the message, you will see that it says, "We recognize that nations have a responsibility to regulate their borders and establish a just and orderly immigration system for the sake of the common good." In other words, Pope Leo was not backing the people who yell open borders whenever someone advocates for a more humane treatment of immigrants. He was actually pushing back against those people, defending the bishops against the false accusation that they were promoting open borders in the first place. If you take the time to look at Pope Leo's full statement, you will see that border control was not his main focus at all. And yet, this is where people focused in. And this highlights a big problem in how many Catholics receive the Pope's and the Bishop's guidance, a kind of loophole Catholicism. Instead of absorbing and meditating deeply on what the popes and bishops are trying to tell them, these Catholics will dig up for little snippets that they can use as a kind of get out of jail card to avoid being challenged by everything else that the popes and bishops are telling them. And the right to regulate borders line is precisely one of the most common examples of this. The Catechism of the Catholic Church holds two principles together, seemingly in tension. The more prosperous nations are obliged, to the extent they are able, to welcome the foreigner, and political authorities, for the sake of the common good for which they are responsible, may make the exercise of the right to immigrate subject to various juridical conditions. But many Catholics zero in on the second part, in a way that effectively cancels the first part in practice, even if they may still pay lip service to it. That's the reason why popes and bishops often preface their calls for a more humane treatment of immigrants with a reminder that yes, states have a right to control their borders. If they did not do this, these Catholics would accuse them of contradicting church doctrine. But this reminder is merely a caveat. It's them saying, yes, we acknowledge this, but now we want you to focus on the other part, on the humane treatment of immigrants. So, using this caveat to once again fixate on border control in order to dismiss everything else, for me, it seems like a very disrespectful dismissal of their guidance. So, we should not practice a loophole Catholicism. Rather, we should take the guidance of the popes and bishops at face value, according to their manifest mind and will, so that we will be better formed to act morally in the instances that they are directing us, whether it be immigration or anything else. And actually, this church teaching about the humane treatment of immigrants goes back at least to St. Pius X. And if you want to dive deeper about Pius X and immigrants, I have dedicated a whole chapter of my book, The Unknown Modern Side of St. Pius X, to Pius and social justice, an expression that he was the first to coin. I will leave a link in the video description below onto where you can acquire this book, as well as a link to my personal website, pedrogabrielwriter.com, where you can learn more about my other books and articles. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give a like and subscribe so that you will always be updated whenever a new video is released. That's all for today. God bless. Let us follow the church without loopholes and see you soon.